Okay, just want to double check, ready to go? Good evening, everybody. My name is Gary Gaston. I am the CEO of the Nashville Civic Design Center. And our mission at the Civic Design Center is to elevate the quality of Nashville's built environment and to promote public participation in the creation of a more beautiful and functional city for everyone. I want to welcome you to our very first virtual urban design forum. As we heard earlier today from Mayor Cooper, Nashville's best days are ahead of us, and we strongly believe this in the work that we do at the organization. When the Civic Design Center was founded almost 20 years ago, our goal was to chart a future for Nashville's built environment when there wasn't a defined vision in place for the city. We've been striving for our best days ever since then, and we will continue to do the work of our mission in the coming years, and particularly in the months ahead, which we're feeling are an unprecedented time in the city and across the country. It is with strong thanks to our ongoing and multiple partners that we have in Nashville, our Metro government, the Greater Nashville Regional Council, our founding institutions, the College of Architecture and Design, Vanderbilt University, among other institutions across the city, fellow nonprofits, neighborhood organizations, individual members and sponsors that make this work that we do at the Civic Design Center possible. So thank you all who have been a part of the organization, both historically and currently, and as we move forward into the future. It's very appreciated and needed, and thankful for that. As I said, these are definitely unprecedented times. Not only did Nashville experience a tornado 4 weeks ago, but now over the last 2 weeks with COVID-19, we know that there's a lot of uncertainty and maybe confusion happening in the city. So thus, working with our staff members who have been incredible in this process to help me personally, as well as another staff member that were impacted by the tornado directly when our homes were hit. And we know that we have many other friends across the city in nonprofits and in neighborhoods where we've worked that were directly impacted. So we are presenting this urban design forum entitled Responsibly Responding to Disasters. And we're featuring a conversation with a variety of topics, with a variety of speakers on this topic from professionals who are working in various different areas across the city. And I would like to welcome our panelists who are joining us for this Urban Design Forum tonight. We have Hannah Davis, the Affordable Housing Manager with the Mayor's Office. We have Tequila Johnson, co-founder and vice president of the Equity Alliance. We have Odessa Kelly, Executive Director of Stand Up Nashville. Caitlin Daskew, Executive Director of Rebuilding Together. And Carol Pedigo, Executive Director of the AIA Middle Tennessee. And we'll pause while they're all popping up onto the screen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you. To get started, I want to ask that each of you give us a short introduction of yourself and tell us about your organization, its mission, and some of the services that you provide. And why don't we start with Hannah, and then we'll go to Tequila, then Odessa, then Caitlin, then Carol. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm not hearing Hannah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Carol. Let's move. Tequila, can you talk for a second so I can hear you?
Sure.
Okay, why don't you start, Tequila? We'll figure out.
Okay. Hi everyone. This is like my third Zoom call, so hopefully I can bring some energy. I know now we are zoomed out, and if you're like me, you're dying for human interaction. So thank you all for just joining and continuing to really fight and make sure that we are recognizing everyone in our community. I am Tequila Johnson. I'm co-founder and I'm actually co-executive director now of the Equity Alliance. The Equity Alliance, a nonprofit organization here. We are statewide, but we're based in Nashville. And our mission is simply to get more African Americans engaged in the civic process. We believe in using our voting power in the fight for social justice and for economic equality for African Americans and communities of color. So we are all about the tools and strategies that we need to be able to recognize the American dream and just live happy, holistic lives.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Odessa, can I go next?
Hey, hello everyone. Odessa Kelly. Same as Tequila, been on Zoom calls all day, but I'm glad to be on this one finally. Nashville native, born and raised here in the city. I am from East Nashville, so I actually went through the tornado in '98, was here for 2010 as well with the flood. I'm the executive director for Stand Up Nashville. We've been around for 4 years. We negotiated the community benefits agreement about the redevelopment of the fairgrounds for the soccer stadium that's coming in. It's the first one ever done in the state of Tennessee. We work on things like the Do Better bill to bring more transparency to what's happening with our public dollars. In a nutshell, or with the flood, I'm the executive director for Stand. I'm sorry, there's a little reverb. In a nutshell, what we do is we do economic work, equity, with a racial justice lens to it, and also trying to just work for marginalized communities and the working class here in Nashville.
Great, thank you, Odessa. Caitlin, you're next.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having us. My name is Caitlin Dastug, and I am the executive director for Rebuilding Together here in Nashville. We're a local organization of a national affiliate network of Rebuilding Togethers across the country. And our mission is repairing homes, revitalizing communities, and rebuilding lives. We've been active working in Nashville for 25 years this year. We got our founding by a group of committed architects in town, Ms. Carol Pettigo being one of them, who started our organization back in the mid-90s. And we work year-round addressing home repair needs for homeowners in Nashville-Davidson County. We work mostly with older adults, so senior homeowners, people with disabilities who have critical home repair needs that they're unable to meet. And we step in, provide the funding and the project management to get the projects done. So we're delighted to be here. We are doing a lot of work in Bordeaux. We launched our Bordeaux initiative earlier this year, and we're committed to helping and working with the community of Bordeaux to serve about 65 homeowners over the next 2 to 3 years and work in community space revitalization projects, but also share our organization's expertise in home repair with those who are affected by the tornadoes. So we were active after the flood of 2010. I've been in Nashville about 8 years personally, so I was not here for the earlier tornado or the flood, but our organization was very active. But I'm no stranger to long-term disaster recovery. I'm a native of South Louisiana and was in high school when Katrina hit. So I know how long the recovery usually takes, how frustrating it can be, but how amazing it can be when community partners work together with an eye towards equity in the long-term rebuilding. So thanks for convening us, Gary.
Thank you. Carol, you want to
Yeah.
go?
Gary, thanks for bringing us together. This is going to be amazing just to be a part of these phenomenal partnerships that we're looking at so we can forge together into the future of what Nashville's going to be. I'm Carol Pettigo, Executive Director of AIA Middle Tennessee. We're a chapter of the American Institute of Architects. AIA is a tri-federated organization. We're a 501c6 nonprofit. We're a membership organization, and we were formed in 1857 by 13 architects in New York. Currently, our headquarters is in Washington, D.C. We're 95,000 members, which if we took them all, we couldn't fill up Neyland Stadium. So there's not that many architects when you think about that. We have over 250 offices globally, and our structure is 3-tiered. So we have local representation, we have state representation, and we have federal representation. Each component of the AIA is accredited by that national office, and we are independently governed by local boards of directors. In Tennessee, we have the AIA Middle Tennessee chapter in Nashville. We have an office in Memphis, one in Knoxville, one in Chattanooga. And our mission is we aspire to be an inclusive community of architects that advocate for the highest quality of life by shaping the built environment. And AIA Middle Tennessee exists to serve and support our members and advance the profession of architecture.
Thank you, Carol. And also AIA was very much critical in the early stages in the founding of the Civic Design Center. So you're touching a lot of different groups here. Hannah, let's check your audio now.
How's it working?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah Davis. I'm the Affordable Housing Manager at the Mayor's Office. And so primarily previous to March 3rd, I was working on affordable housing related issues throughout our county. Manage the Barnes Fund, which is $42 million of operating funds that have been invested into nonprofits like Rebuilding Together and others who preserve and create affordable housing. So that was already an issue that was really at a crucial, challenging place for our city, and that was before the tornado came. I'll have some data that I can share with everyone, but for reference, there were 453 residential structures that were impacted, and that's from the level of minor damage to major damage. And some of those were apartment complexes with multiple, 100 or more units in them. So we are really facing that challenge head on, and I'm working with our long-term recovery group now. So I'll go into more detail about the work that the city is doing to support the recovery efforts. But right now, obviously, COVID has put a real constraint on all of the organizations that were so involved in the community, doing door-to-door canvassing, working on a lot of outreach to the community to make sure our neighbors had the resources that they needed. But for the sake of safety, we are obviously encouraging people not to do that, to be able to shelter in place as much as possible. So our efforts now are focused on stabilization. We want to be able to make sure that when we tell people that they're safer at home, we know that that requires a lot from the city and organizations to make sure that people have stable residences and have the resources they need. CDC guidelines. So usually focused on affordable housing every day, but have been getting up to speed. Really grateful for our partners who have been making sure that housing is integral to this recovery effort, and as well as helping get me personally up to date on the models for recovery, and then also guiding the long-term recovery work.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Now, in Nashville, we've experienced 4 major natural disasters in the last 22 years, and we've referenced the flood, the tornado of '98, 2010 flood, tornado of just 4 weeks ago, and now COVID. For the focus of our conversation tonight, I think we'll mostly be focused on the events of the past month, but certainly we want to refer back to lessons learned from 98 and 2010 in the efforts of the city, and how we can be sure to utilize those efforts and carry that forward in new and innovative ways for recovery. When a natural disaster occurs, there is a range of needs and the timelines that follow these events, from the emergency response, the assessments of overall damage, follow-up to relief, temporary housing, and recovery planning, both short and long term. So I'm wondering, from all of your perspectives and the expertise that's present here tonight, could you reflect and describe to us, just from since the tornado, what your organization has been doing over the past month, and how does it fit into these timelines, this immediate versus more of a shorter term and then longer term? And then Hannah, I thought it'd be good if you could start from the, just kick off from the city's perspective. And then, because we're all, it's visual, after that, we can follow the same order, or you can, and then the future conversations, if you want to interject something, just kind of hold up your hand like you do if we're all in person. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Hannah?
Great. Yes. So I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with the timeline, but I think it's helpful to remind ourselves that we are not even a month out from the tornado. So March 3rd, the tornado hit. And, you know, that was obviously immediate. That was rescue, search and rescue, stabilization, making sure that people's immediate needs were met, that people were safe, wellness checks. And so we are grateful to our, you know, our first responders, of course, who were immediately out there clearing power lines and getting people out of unsafe structures. And so that was a learning that I had. I thought that would maybe be a 48-hour period, and then we would move into recovery. I've, of course, learned that that's not the case, that initial sort of stage is actually longer, and that's been even more the case with COVID as we're working to stabilize people. So on March 7th, we opened up our 3 disaster assistance centers. These were one-stop shops to be able to service our neighbors in a way that was most accessible to them. So we had brought together Disaster SNAP, FEMA, SBA, Red Cross, everyone into one location. And we saw, of course, hundreds of people in those locations at Hermitage, Hadley Park, and East Park. And we were, you know, understandably distressed when we had to close those. But CDC was advising that. We were advising everyone to shelter in place, and then we were continuing to try to service people at these disaster assistance centers. So on March 23rd, FEMA pulled their teams out from in-person visits, and we followed suit and closed our disaster assistance center. And so something that's been, you know, I think really comforting to me as not just an employee of the city, but a resident, is knowing that there is already a coordinated emergency management plan in place. And so, you know, I have a newfound appreciation for the level of planning and partnership that goes on, you know, every day, whether we're in a disaster or not. And that's the preparedness stage of recovery efforts. And so in our coordinated emergency management plan, there are partners named. And so that's why maybe you saw donations being directed to the community foundation, or donations, in-kind donations being sent to the community resource center. Those are partners that are named in that emergency management plan. And so that, you know, in times of chaos, which is what happens after a disaster, it's helpful to have designated people who know that they are ready to be mobilized. And that is continuing. So we have UMCOR, which is United Methodist Community Armed Relief, who are our designated case management. They're, you know, obviously going to work with organizations throughout the city, but they'll be the ones sort of accountable for the progress as help with the recovery of every one of the neighbors who were impacted by the tornado. And then thankfully, we implemented a new technology in this disaster that was a parcel by parcel analysis of every property that was impacted by the tornado. So not only did we have task forces that went out and conducted those analyses, they took a photo of every parcel, did an analysis of the level of damage, but then we also had an intake form that allowed people to share with us, in addition to the intake that they do with FEMA and Red Cross, the needs that they had. So I referenced previously, we had over 2,200 structures that were impacted. Majority of those were residential. 1,566 of those parcels were residential, and they had ranging from minor to major damage. And then we had 456 commercial parcels that experienced damage. And then FEMA is continuing to receive cases from people, even though they're not here. They still physically, they have a website and phone that people can initiate their registration in terms of what they'll file with FEMA. And we're encouraging everyone to do that. Some people don't think that they had significant enough damage. We really encourage everyone to file. And the deadline for that will be May 4th. So far they've received 430 homeowner and renter applications and have awarded $1.3 million so far. So, we expect, of course, that number to go up, and we know that people will additionally be rejected from FEMA, and that's part of why we want to make sure that they are plugged in with community organizations who can help them understand the reasons for that rejection and the process for an appeal if it's warranted. And additionally, Red Cross just announced that they are extending their deadline to April 7th. So that is new, and we're trying to make sure that everyone goes through, certainly Red Cross and FEMA. And I think something that has been a big takeaway for myself and us, the mayor's office, is how much more communication is required during this time, because, and the grace that we're all extending to each other, certainly we appreciate, but I'm learning how much communication happened just in, sort of bumping into people, or the meetings that we had that we were able to share. So learning for myself the new schedule of proactive communication to make sure that everyone is able to stay up to date, I think is crucial. And then working towards the formation of a long-term recovery group, which will be any organization in the city that wants to participate in recovery. It can be part of this formal structure that's used in disaster recovery. And so that will, as well, in addition to creating some accountability for our office and other leaders in town, also provide more visibility and transparency to how every individual is being serviced in the recovery of their neighborhoods.
Great, thank you. Odessa.
Yeah, so just with the question that you asked, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that one of the biggest issues that has happened in between 98 and 2010 is all the gentrification that is taking place with the disaster. So you asked what we're doing. Our efforts have been toward not just helping Nashville, but also ensuring that we don't make the same mistakes that have happened in the past. I forgot, I think Caitlin, I think you said you're from Southern Louisiana, so you know all too well what happened to the Ninth Ward and the displacement that happened there. We've seen it happen here in Nashville. As I said, I'm an original native of East Nashville, and if you know, majority of East Nashville does not look like me anymore, and the displacement was exacerbated by the natural disasters. In collaboration with the Equity Alliance, we led the Don't Sell Out North campaign. I'm pretty sure a lot of on this call are familiar with that, and that basically was talking about giving direct services to people who are usually last to be thought about in this effort. But also the very first communities to have a redevelopment plan that does not include them in the process. So going forward, that's where our efforts have been going toward, is making sure that our most marginalized communities are at front and center and are weighted in a lot of the conversations that are going forward. To some of the things that you just talked about, Hannah, you said there's analysis has been done. Like, I would love to have those assessments, because Gideon's Army is who we've been supporting along with Equity Alliance and doing direct services. We wanted to make sure that the groups who are out here doing the work are the ones who will build actual camaraderie and authenticity with the people in the communities. I just want to speak plain. There are a lot of communities who've gotten, or a lot of organizations who've gotten money to do the recovery work, but they really don't do the work, if you ask me, from my perspective. So we wanted to make sure that between Gideon's Army, Stand Up Nashville, the Equity Alliance, and there are other groups out here doing good work across Nashville, we wanted to make sure that the work that we're doing is not just giving out direct services to relieve the stress that people are currently in, but also looking forward down the road. How can we build in some of the pipelines that are needed to stop some of the systematic issues that we're having in Nashville, right? Like in this whole recovery effort is gonna happen for these 1,500 parcels, you know, who's gonna get those jobs, right? Who's gonna be trained to do that work? You know, are these gonna be, you know, jobs that pay over a $15 wage, you know, because there's no way that we can talk about the disaster without also talking about this pandemic and the recession that we're all about to go through, you know, and that's real. So it's a little irresponsible, I think, to just talk about the disaster efforts. Not saying that anyone's on here is irresponsible, but when you think about it, to think about that as well, because the same people who are most impacted by this are going to be the same individuals who are going to catch the worst of what this recession is going to cause. So going forward, when we look at this, let's not only just look at like what direct services do we need, but how are we going to roll that out? How are we going to turn those into jobs and careers and to start to build pathways out of communities and ensure that Nashvillians, because right now the displacement is more than just a racial issue, right? If you make under $70,000 in Nashville, you cannot afford to live in the city. Well, here's one of those silver linings in all of this. We now have the proof and the evidence that's right in front of us to build in some of those cities to give our city, our most marginalized people better protections. You know, how many times have we seen nurses? Have we seen social workers? What a time when we really need 911 callers and we don't have enough in the city. What are we going to do to make sure they can stay in their homes, stay in the city that they protect?
Amazing. Thank you, Odessa. Tequila, do you want to
Sure, I guess
pop
that's
in next?
play for me to chime in. A lot of the efforts that we've been doing have really been around centering the existing residents. I know just based on this call, there are a lot of people that are actually leading other efforts to try and rebuild and do those sorts of things. But one of the things that I think is missing from the whole conversation is how do we begin to build authenticity? And you do that through coalition building with organizations that have relationships in the existing community, making sure that as we are rebuilding North Nashville, the community's voice is in place. So what we've done is the Equity Alliance and in coalition with Stand Up Nashville, of course, Gideon's Army, who's doing a ton of work on the ground right now, without, if I might add, without a lot of the city support or support from a lot of the private entities, but just from community members around the city who believe in the work that's happening. That's how a lot of our organizations have been able to function in this disaster, because this also impacts us as well. So we don't want to leave that out of the conversation, but we want to make sure that we just express that this work is about relational organizing. So whereas a lot of people have gone out and collected information on the parcels and the landowners, that's important, but it's also important to make sure that we're centering those relationships. So we've knocked on a few thousand doors. We've followed up with those people who we knocked and whose data we collected 3 times. We're constantly asking what their need. We're working, most importantly, with Building Coalition, working with Gideon's Army, working with Stand Up Nashville, Civic Design Center, and a lot of other organizations, just to make sure that as we're moving this forward, we're all kind of hitting this from every angle, because I don't want this conversation to get one-sided and just be about development and how do we develop, because right now the community is overdeveloped, but how do we center the community in these decisions and in this decision-making process? And that's what a lot of our work has been centered around, is just centering the community, being genuine and authentic, building relationships, organizing, and coalition building.
Great, thank you. Caitlin?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So yeah, rebuilding together, obviously we're, you know, our work is working with homeowners, many who are vulnerable homeowners. And what we know just from past disasters is if you have homeowners insurance, it's great, especially in a tornado. Much of the homeowner's insurance versus a flood will help cover many of the repairs from tornadoes. But if you don't have homeowner's insurance, and many homeowners don't, you're looking at FEMA. And what we do know is FEMA will not cover the full range of needs that a homeowner might have to rebuild after a disaster. So we really see ourselves coming on the tail end of the recovery process and helping homeowners, vulnerable homeowners, who still have unmet needs after insurance and FEMA has been tapped out, to help rebuild. And I just want to give a huge kudos to Gideon's Army, to Equity Alliance, to Stand Up, to Tequila and Odessa. Y'all have been amazing at the initial response. So one of the things Rebuilding Together has been trying to do is just amplify the messages coming out of y'all's organizations and helping get it to homeowners who need to hear it and need to know that resources are coming, work can happen, you have options about whether to sell your house or stay in the long term, and that there are a lot of coalitions forming and a lot of organizations who are ready to help. So yeah, that's how we see ourselves being part of the long-term recovery.
And then, Caitlin, just what are the direct services that Rebuilding Together does so
Sure.
people understand that?
Yeah, so we work with existing homeowners. So homeowners, so all owner occupied single family houses. We work with homeowners who meet certain income restrictions. So it's 80% of area median income and below, which actually captures a lot of homeowners. And we work mostly with households who have a senior or someone with a disability in the household and who have home repair needs that the household cannot address. So we do a lot of roofs, HVAC systems, electrical accessibility modifications have been big in recent years, helping folks age in place. So we do a lot of bathroom and kitchen remodels. And on average, we spend about $10,000 to $15,000 per house making those repairs for homeowners. We have an application process. So our day-to-day work that happens year-round, we serve approximately 25 to 30 households annually. And where we've worked across the city for most of our 25-year history, we are focused on the Bordeaux area for the next few years. But obviously we would like to be also a part of the long-term recovery for non-areas that are outside Bordeaux.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin. Carol.
Hey, kudos to everybody that is so passionate and standing up for our community that we all love. And to talk about architects, because for so long of my career, the general public thinks that that's a privileged elite group that has access to an architect. And honestly, it's not really that way. Architects are licensed to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And so when you think about a disaster like this, their skill set is invaluable in all phases of emergency management. AIA members are equipped to take action toward safer, healthier, and more resilient communities. Additionally, thousands of our members are already trained and ready to respond alongside state and local authorities after a disaster. And they're adept and skilled in anticipating the impacts of interventions, such as the gentrification that you're talking about, and also to recognize signs of potential building malfunction and failure. So if you've got homes that are damaged, that are not being properly assessed, we've got the skill sets there to help to understand how to mitigate that. In a state of emergency, architects and engineers work together to determine the habitability of homes and businesses, preventing further harm and injury to the unsuspecting residents. I mentioned our structure and that our fabric is tri-federated, and that allows us with those 200 plus offices across the country to steal best practices and ideas. That's been formulated and the wonderful document, Disaster Assistance Handbook, that allows us to take and incubate yet another organization that you kind of heard about us having really good ideas. There's one here in Tennessee called 10 Save, and that is a SAVE coalition of architects and engineers that are called upon by a community, by a mayor's office. And we responded in Putnam County to help them to do their damage assessments there. A former member of our Tennessee Emergency Management, Cecil Whaley, a dear friend. I'm sorry to tell you that he is no longer with us, but he was integral in us being able to set that partnership together with Tennessee Emergency Management. So we deployed to Putnam County and performed rapid safety assessments. And we hope to do more with the community if the community asks of us. And that's kind of how it works. We don't go getting in other people's business, but we're here and we're a resource and we can help.
Thank you, Carol. I had the my very first, even before I moved to Nashville in 2000, I volunteered on the 1999 RUDAP process, which was mostly focused in East Nashville. And I'm just curious on that aspect. Clearly a very significantly different city, Nashville, now than 22 years ago. And because we have experienced tremendous growth in this city, it's both had its positive and its negatives from aspects of just seeing the city grow, increasing population, a lot of economic gains, but clearly that does not translate to everyone. And there's the displacement that comes with that type of growth. I want to talk just very briefly about the RUDAP process, and then I want to put on that the concept and the realization that we need to utilize this, what has happened, so that we don't repeat some of the negative aspects that have come along following some disasters, both here and what we've seen in other cities. So Carol, since you were involved in organizing RUDAT, I wonder if you could just touch on that a little bit and some reflections on that process and what happened and what that timeline looked like.
Yeah, the RUDAT is a grassroots approach to community development issues. The program combines local resources with an expertise of multidisciplinary teams, nationally recognized professionals, and they come and they identify ways to encourage desirable change. It's a process, it's an exercise. It's flexible, and there's typically 4 parts to it. When you get started, a local leader or citizen calls the AIA and they ask for help. A steering committee representing the residents, the local groups is formed, and they prepare an application. A representative from the AIA visits the community and suggests revisions to the application and prepares for an evaluation by the team. Upon approval of the application, the AIA makes formal commitment to the community. The getting organized, the team leader selected by AIA meets with the steering committee. This visit introduces the leaders to the community and its concerns, and it sparks a broader community interest and participation in the process. Participants begin the team workshop, including initial steps that will facilitate the eventual implementation of an action plan. And then there's the action plan. The AIA selects a multidisciplinary team of 6 to 10 professionals who visit our community. It's an intense 4-day workshop. And after listening to the concerns and ideas of residents and community leaders, viewing both the study area and the surrounding community, the team prepares and publishes a report that is presented in a public meeting on the last day. And then the taking action, it belongs to the community at that point in time. And it's up to us to do with it what we will for the next leadership that comes, mayor after mayor, for the community. I hope that's helpful. Unmute, Gary.
Oh, I am muted by host. Can you hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So AIA offers that resources. I know there are probably other types of processes. I'm wondering if Tequila and Odessa, you could talk more about the Don't Sell Out North campaign and the efforts amongst that, and how that is engaging the community, and where the how people are getting support through that.
Tequila, you want to start? Yeah.
Sure. I think I touched on it. The biggest thing is centering the community, and at the core of what the Don't Sell Out North campaign is, it is really centering a way for us all to come together in coalition, figure out what our areas are that we're focused on, and how we can support one another. But at the core of it, we are directly giving services to people because I think, as a lot of you alluded to, this was a crisis, and when it happened, it was everyone jumped in to do something. For us, the first thing that we saw was, obviously Gideon's Army was on the front line, and so how can we support them with the work that they were doing? How can we work in coalition with the mayor's office to make sure that whatever opportunities or resources are available that way, we're giving out to the community? So we've essentially served as a community liaison in this process for a lot of different resources and information that was out there. But at the core of it, it is trying to really galvanize or build that bridge between the community and a lot of the efforts that are happening, because what we're seeing, what we're seeing on what we were seeing on the doors and what now we're hearing on the phone is that a lot of people feel overwhelmed, not just by everything that's happening, but by a lot of the outreach. So we're really trying to uplift organizations like Gideon's Army, the Equity Alliance, the IMF, the churches that have these existing relationships, so that people don't just feel over inundated with information and bombarded, but a part of the process. So centering people, we've done that, like I said, through intentional follow-up, outreach, making sure that we're utilizing our existing organizations and relationships to continue building existing relationships while raising money from a lot of our individual donors that normally give to our organization, just asking them to pivot money to the organization so that we can do the things that we've been doing, which is giving out tens of thousands of dollars for rent relief, for paying down payments, putting people in hotels, you name it. I mean, there are just so many needs right now. And a lot of those needs, unfortunately, are financial. So really, like Odessa said, we're at the place now where it's like, where do we really start to see this 5, 10, months from now? What are we going to be doing then? Because a lot of the direct service needs are being met, but a lot of the financial needs are still going unmet. So really just pivoting in the middle of this crisis, like everyone else is here to really learn what each of these different organizations represented are doing and how we can come together.
Yeah, that was great, Tequila. Just to piggyback off of that, in the coalition that we have, Stand Up Nashville is coming in on the other side of that to just support. So the Equity Alliance and Gideon's Army are on the ground. They're doing direct services and all those things that Tequila's talking about, right? But when we really start talking about true building, like I'm really interested in knowing more about this. Is it root out or root debt? I didn't know if you're talking about.
It's RUDAT, and that stands for Regional Urban Design Assistance Team.
Should have known
just
that.
so people know.
Okay. But thinking like if this is a process that has been around, right? Even with this best intentions, again, there's a lot of displacement that's happened in the places where I'm pretty sure these processes have taken place. So the thing is that we're coming in to make sure that that type of process is happening, but also in trying to learn from the ways that it's happened before. So along with everything that Tequila just talked about, right? It is us, this process and this campaign is more about putting actual faces to the people who are going through these things, right? I mean, let's be honest, when a lot of people think about predominantly African-American neighborhoods, right? You have this very stereotypical thought, what do you think about it? It doesn't mean, it's baked into all of our subconscious, right? You think about someone who's unemployed or just sitting on the porch, and that is so far from the truth, right? These are individuals who go to work every day. They're teachers, these are social workers. These are our sanitation people who pick up our trash. These are people who are, what do you call them? Call takers.
Call centers.
Yeah, who work in call centers. These are all jobs that we don't think about every day, but they're necessary to be the infrastructure of the city. This is how we got to be in the IT city, right? So when we think about that and we take assessment of all these things, we have to start thinking about also in the recovery, what are the longer systematic things that have been in place or are not in place, as we all can see now with the gaps of this pandemic, in the ways that we can change this, right? So that's always excited to hear say that they already have an assessment, because that was part of the work that we were trying to do, right? You know, we're gonna hopefully get a funding so we can put organizers on the ground to really talk about how do we really rebuild well, right? That was one of the things that happened in Sandy, I believe. Sandy's the one that happened in New Jersey, right? Okay, they rebuilt really well. And the reason why they rebuilt really well is because they thought about the long-term opportunities they could get out of that, you know? I hope that when the city does an assessment of all the damage they're gonna do, they're eventually gonna go out and say, okay, we need people to come in and do this work. But before they do that, I say, how can we train Nashville residents to do work, you know, build a career, build a pathway out of poverty or into the middle class, first of all, right? And then when they do contract out the work, are we gonna give work to the lowest bidder? Because if you give work to the lowest bidder, then what happens is you continue the same cycle that a lot of people of color and African Americans are trapped into. We end up working for subcontractors who pay the lowest wage and make it impossible for people to live. So now they end up with 2 or 3 jobs and then just this vicious cycle, right? I'm pro-union. Unions are protected jobs. They have standards on these jobs. They're the way that we rebuilt the United States in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Why can't we do it again, especially with us going through all these different things, right? So I'm hoping that everyone who's on this call will help us in pushing for the standards of who's actually going to get these contracts to do the work and who are they going to put to work, who are they training down the road. There is a program, the MC3, that is the Music City Career Construction Careers program that's out there. It is actually training people of color, and not just people of color, but people in marginalized communities to do these construction jobs, right? When they work for a union, they make 3 times as they do when they work for some of these companies who subcontract out their work and pay them, you know, $10, $11, $12 for work they should be paying $30 for, right? So when we start thinking about health, how we build a healthy community, we have to think about it in that way.
Great. That's wonderful, Odessa. And I think there's a question on here I think that's really relevant on the chat. It's what does the damage look like when we're defining damage to various different buildings? Is there a way when you go in through and doing the assessment, what are the levels of damage, and how do you define folks who received the damage? How do you consider folks who, you know, is it if you lost power? Or I'm just curious if we could have a better definition of what the different levels of damage were following the tornado.
Yes, so there was minor, major, destroyed, and rebuildable. And so those were obviously just based on the look. So, you know, these were trained professionals, but this was them going door to door. And so that was to be able to get a sense for the city about where we are. And I, of course, should have mentioned this, but certainly provide that data to our partners, Odessa, Tequila, everyone on the call. We had originally put it out, but, you know, it's public data. Who owns a home, but we didn't want to make it especially easy for anyone with predatory practices. But you know, the trusted partners in our recovery group, certainly we would want you to have access to it. And that's one thing we've been working on as an aside, is that data piece. So the process is we had people on the ground, Metro folks, doing that parcel level analysis. And I've been working to get Red Cross data and then what we can from FEMA as well, so that we know someone's individual situation. Because you're exactly right. If someone was out without power, they lost groceries, they, you know, had a significant impact, even if it wasn't structural. And so FEMA and Red Cross each have their own different processes. And if someone didn't qualify for theirs, then we would send them to NeedLink and our other direct assistance partners who are accessible through 211. But that's been my work, is to try to marry that parcel level data that's pertinent to the structures with the individual data, knowing that something that might not have been visibly destroyed from the outside, still the individuals inside had significant challenges. And so the case management standard that will be implemented is that people will be returned to the state that they were before. That's about an individual level. I think Odessa's point is so pertinent about what can we do at a community level, not to just return to where we are, because so many of our systems were broken before, but to look at this as a time to re-examine and bring together the communities. And that's what I think that Don't Sell Out North campaign was so powerful, because it sort of tells people who might have a predatory outlook on the situation that they're being watched, that there's protection in the community, that and reminds the residents that they are part of that community, that they're what makes that neighborhood itself. And so I think the relationships, the trusted relationships that people have in our city with their organizations are so crucial to this rebuilding effort, so that we don't just go back to the way things always were. We always want to be looking at ways that are more equitable and really reflect what we want to build as the future of our city. And I think it's hard to imagine, it's easy to think, well, let's just do the way we've done it before. This is already so, painful, and we just want to return people, and let's just do it quickly. But I think if it takes a little bit more time, but it leapfrogs us 5 years ahead for the strength of our neighborhoods, then and like Tequila was saying, and centers the residents and makes them feel really proud of what they've done, then I think it's worth taking a couple of extra months.
Yes, and just closing out that line of thought, if there's other comments from the group just on what are, how do we make sure that we don't leave behind our most vulnerable populations and I think we've talked about short term, and we're definitely talking about the longer term aspects, but is there anything that hasn't been touched on that we'd like to make a comment about? Carol, you're raising your hand.
So when we talk about regional urban design assistance teams, the one thing I want you to understand is that the work, it really lies on the community. It allows us to create an identity like never before. When we went to work in East Nashville, there were, I want to say, probably 11 community organizations that none of them had ever met one another before. And we ended up with a Rediscover East campaign that was absolutely amazing. And when the community meetings would happen, we would have 800 to 1,100 people, and they would come forward and they would tell their story and what was important to them about the community. And that information is documented, and it's regurgitated back so that we can make sure that the architects are resounding to the community what they are being told. The community leadership has to identify what the problem is. If the problem for East Nashville, they wanted to have commercial sectors. They wanted to have a place to buy groceries. They wanted to have a place to go have coffee. They didn't want to have to cross the river to go downtown to have those resources. It was important to them that they build that community. So that's what the team came in to fix. That's what they came in to give them an opportunity and a skill set to have those conversations amongst themselves and with the leadership of the mayor's office and our regional surrounding counties even. So that's the part that you've got to have a takeaway on. What you're doing and what we are seeing that's happening now is part of the process. And it's a very integral part of the process, but the ownership has to lie within that community, because when the experts walk away and they leave that document, you've got to be the one holding it up and say, yes, like the plan of Nashville. We said, this is what's important to us and we need to keep on doing this. So just compound that thought.
Right. So it's a very community-driven process where
Yes.
the architect group or that team is delivering something that's reflective of the community vision in that process.
And it's not just architects. I mean, there are any discipline that you can think of, the acumen that comes from the accounting of what is investable, the banking, what happens on civic spaces, the landscape, the whatever the discipline is that's needed, that's what we pull together, and that's what we pull the resources from across the country and shore up with our local community. We have a wonderful we call it the National Organization of Minority Architects here in Nashville. And I would absolutely advocate that they were front and center working with this process.
Great, thank you, Carol.
Mm-hmm.
Odessa?
Yeah, with that process question, when y'all do these things, those sound amazing. Are they done in a time frame of like 6 to 8 p.m. where working people can get to those meetings, right? I remember the turbos came out of that. Is that the right term of what they did, like the small incubators that you were talking about to train people? Out of that came the loans that basically built 5 Points, right? African Americans didn't get any of those loans because they weren't able to attend things like that. So when we talk about the Don't Sell Out North campaign, you know, someone made a reference on here in the chat, you know, we still have pockets of and this is more than racial. I just use North Nashville because it is the biggest looming example of some of the things that we go through. But working class people are having these issues. If you were to go out in the Hermitage and Donaldson, I'm pretty sure you're gonna find cops and firefighters and people as well, you know, who are also gonna have these exact same issues on their mind. So I just wanna make sure that when we do this time, that those meetings aren't at 10 to 12 during the day, that they're at 6 to 8 p.m. in the afternoons, weekends where people can get to them, and that those trainings that are given to like rebuild the things that they want to see, that there are clauses built into them to make sure that people of color and minorities actually get an opportunity to get those businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. Switching just a little bit here in the, I know we're going to have time specifically to focus more on questions that are coming through on the chat and other social media methods. But I wanted to touch on changing over to COVID-19 and talking about what the new realities are that you're facing as an organization that did not even exist 2 weeks ago, and or at least 3 weeks ago, and how you're adapting and moving forward in what we all do is community-based work. So how, you know, just talk about the challenges and how you're adapting to it.
Well, we're doing it right now.
Yes.
This is what we're doing now.
Yeah. And I will say this, we have probably as many more participants right now than a lot of our events, you know, that we often have. So I think that this is a successful example of that. You're right, Carol, and everybody.
You know, leading through crisis, the first thing for me is you've got to shift your thinking, and it has got to shift on a split second. We don't have time to think a lot of this over. We just got to do. And that's what we do in associations. Disaster gave me two things: a moment to react, and then the decision to overcome. And when you make that decision, I've gotten through 100% of the hard days. I'm good, because we are going to overcome this. Whatever the decision is that's made is the right decision. And as long as we do the due diligence, as long as we work with our heart and our head and mindful of what's coming out of the mouth, that it doesn't interrupt what the good things are that are supposed to happen, we're going to be fine. We've got to identify resources that we didn't have in order to shift. And that means working together with like organizations that are doing good things in the community and saying, we're going to do possibility thinking, design thinking. We're going to think about what the possibilities are, and then figure out who's got those resources, who can we partner with, and how can we make it happen. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Hey, Odessa.
Thank you for letting me go. I'm gonna have to like hop off really quick and then hop right back on. So let me get this point out.
Okay.
The things that's made us shift from this COVID-19 is that as a city, we can't think about our different communities. We have to think about us as a city within this state. This city has tried to pass a lot of things that would have given more protections to us as a city that have been preempted on the state level. So what we really could use from the 117 people who are on this call is if you know people in rural counties outside of Nashville who are also having major effects because of COVID-19 and some of the things of not having sick pay, not having some of the protections in place that are needed for workers going forward. Please identify those people and reach out to us at Stand Up Nashville, because it's going to take a full city effort for us to try to get the state legislature to do what's right by Nashville, right? I think as being a good steward of this city, we all have to kind of just put whatever differences that we have aside and come together and really stand up and really start taking, standing up to the state who does a lot of things because they don't like the big city, and that cannot happen anymore, right? It is imperative that we protect everyone here. We have undocumented people in the city who have zero protections because of some of the silly things that have been passed on the state by the state legislature, right? So we have to find what opportunities we can come together to really ensure that Nashville has everything that it needs. We can take care of ourselves, right? We just need the state to get out of our way and let us do that. So that is pretty much where we've shifted to now. It's trying to build a statewide effort, to really push and make sure that we're putting human beings in front of bottom lines, because it's not the leadership that we're getting as you see from a federal level. So we're gonna have to do it ourselves as Nashville and just lead the way. Okay, gonna hop back off and hop back on.
Okay, all right, Caitlin.
Yeah, another to follow up on Odessa's point too, I think something to keep in mind is those that are impacted by both disasters are renters and tenants. And although, that's not rebuilding together where we work, Tennessee has some of, the least tenant protections across the country. So in an area of opportunity, I think advocating for greater tenant protections from our state would be something to focus on. So happy to work with anyone else that wants to get into it. But COVID-19, rebuilding together, it's a tough one. We serve homeowners who fall in that vulnerable category. So many are seniors, many have underlying health conditions, and most have critical home repair needs that help make their home safer and healthier. But we also have to balance that work with protecting the health and safety of homeowners we're working with. So it's been evolving each day. We've got an amazing team who's been flexible. We've switched to working remotely, like many of you have. We've been in constant communication with homeowners we're working with currently and with past homeowners, checking in and making wellness checks on them. But really looking at how can we still do the work and the critical services that need to happen while taking the right safety precautions. So that includes keeping a safe distance, prioritizing exterior repairs, and also helping connect homeowners who may feel isolated and may not have the resources that they need to meet their other non-home repair needs. It's really been incredible watching the other nonprofits who work directly with senior citizens in our community continue to make sure those needs are met. And it's a lot of hard decisions, I think, and a lot of amazing leadership that I think Carol was talking about, just deciding we're going to get through it, that we're going to continue to live out our missions. It may look a little differently, but still marching forward. And the other big thing that we've done, spring is usually our big volunteer season. So April is National Rebuilding Month. And so we've postponed all of our volunteer days for the time being, not to add any additional stress onto our clients. That's it.
Great. Tequila, do you want to?
Sure. Again, like I stated, the majority of our work is centered around relational organizing and coalition building. So the blessing in that is that the shift has been a lot easier because we focus on really just working in relationship and leaning on our neighbors a lot. So that has been an awesome shift. However, we've, like everybody on this call, shifted a lot to digital. So we've brought on some temporary organizers that are focused on the COVID and the tornado efforts. With all of the volunteer and community engagement that happened around the tornado, we're using that to shift over to digital organizing, where we're actually calling and following up with a lot of the people we spoke with, just simply asking, how are you? Do you need anything? Is everything okay? And just really gauging and getting a temperature for where everyone in the community is, because we know that in order for us to really do any of this work, we have to have the people on our side, and they have to trust us, and we have to, continuously be in genuine and intentional relationship. The other thing is focusing on the census, because a lot of the work that everyone is talking about, whether that are immigrants' rights or workers' rights, we know that at the core of all of that is making sure that our voice matters. And in a time like this, everyone needs to be counted. Tomorrow is Census Day, April 1st, and Charlene Oliver, our other co-founder and co-executive director, is doing a press conference with the mayor just to talk about what that means, what the implications are for all of us, for all of our communities, no matter what your class, no matter what your race, no matter any of those things. This is a time where we really need to come together, and there's no better way to do that than to fill out the census form, be counted, make sure that you're represented in your existing community. So that is our big push right now, is really checking on our residents, our most vulnerable residents that we've been in relationship with, working with strong organizations that are doing amazing work in coalition, so that we can learn from one another and we can really lean on community, because right now that is what's needed the most, is each other and community. And, just excited to continue this work, and hoping that everyone can continue having these very open dialogues. So.
That reminds me of this, something that we could collectively do as organizations and as companies and different groups around the city, as we're meeting in these digital virtual platforms, that we could have doing the census form as a part of that sort of staff meeting that you're having. And I think all organizations, that would be an excellent opportunity for them to do that. I don't know the accurate, maybe Hannah, you know this, but for every person that doesn't complete the census, the city loses a really significant amount of money. So if you do know that, maybe you could, how many?
$10,000.
$10,000 for every single person that does not complete the census form. I mean, it's when you think of it in that aspect, it's incredibly important for Nashville in the decade ahead, for us to be sure that we get that. So thank you, Tequila, for mentioning that. And Hannah, Caitlin, Hannah, you want
to put it in context of this conversation, $10,000 is a new roof for someone. That's what we're missing.
And Hannah, working in the city, in the metro government, what a enormous, or one of the biggest institutions in the city. How has that changed the way that you're doing things?
Yes, it's really, I referenced this at the beginning, but a comms challenge, of course, because we want to make sure that people have all the up-to-date information about the federal aid packages, the tornado recovery efforts, the census. But, the more messages that we share, the more diffuse they become. And so right now, we're really focused on making sure that people get up-to-date information about COVID-19 and understand the seriousness of this, and that they are able to stay at home if possible, unless they're essential services. And if they need support, that we're able to translate what's coming from the federal and state level into easily accessible and digestible resources so that people understand. I mean, I do this all day long and I still feel like, okay, wait, and how's that, piece work with this piece? And so we're working to try to stay up to date on those resources, but it's been challenging. Resources will be posted online, but we also know that not everyone has consistent access to Wi-Fi, and libraries are closed. So, pushing people to digital resources is not always the most accessible. But we are just getting creative and making sure that we are reaching everyone. We're grateful to have trusted partners throughout the city that help us to make sure that people are getting what they need, and that as those new resources come online, that people know whether or not they qualify and know how to navigate them. And then on the response specifically to COVID, we've also grateful for the United Way and the Nashville Response Fund. The URL was just posted in the chat. So really encourage people to go there and share the needs that they have. You know, just echoing the community comment, but for anyone who does still have consistent employment, you know, we're all really having to chip in to support our neighbors. And I think it's been amazing to see, because we all know, you know, that could have been us, and that we are going to have to get to the other side together. But that Nashville Response Fund is really crucial to our neighbors who were without employment suddenly. And then there's also up-to-date resources. So, you know, 211 is sort of the on the phone resource, which we're so grateful for, because it gets around the need for Wi-Fi, and it can be a single call where someone can be directed to support. But if you have Wi-Fi, going on the website and being able to navigate those resources, I think is something I've been making sure I stay up to date with, and encourage anyone on here to as well. I know so many of you already are, because you know, as we're getting those questions, then we can make sure to be sharing up-to-date information with our neighbors.
Are there any other resources? I mean, we talked about FEMA, we've talked about a lot of different of those resources and the funds. Were there any that we haven't talked about? I mean, a part of this will be directing people to where a list of these are as a follow-up to the questions, but can anybody think of anything that hasn't come up yet that you might want to call out to? And Carol, I'll say hey.
Yeah, as part of my career in studying disasters, mental health issues, they're going to come into play, and we need to make sure that we get those people to those right resources as soon as we possibly can. I can't imagine there are no disasters that are typical. Every disaster has its own DNA, its own footprint. So one size does not fit all whenever you're mitigating these type circumstances. But the one thing that rings true is when the stressors begin to overwhelm the population, then you start to see atypical behaviors that are not what you want to see. So having mental health in the game and in the resource pipeline, I think is a big asset.
Odessa, thanks for, see you're in the car now. Come back. Thanks for coming back.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I had to leave the place I was in. Real quickly too, just to kind of spotlight, one of the resources that we need desperately is that the Barnes Fund was cut in half, you know, and there's going to be a big need for workforce and affordable housing. I'm afraid, I just don't know, like, what is the plan to build and not make sure that everything is built at market rate. So that's a resource that we definitely need. Hopefully there are builders and architects willing to tap into that. So just a fund that we need to really reprioritize and put back in the center of where we prioritize money out of our budget.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions that we've got on here is considering affordable housing, what specifically are we doing to make sure that those impacted who cannot stay in their homes have access to funding, whether it's hotels or even with COVID, there's been a huge drop in obviously like Airbnb visitors, and are those houses being brought back into the market at a rate or being made available for longer term rents? And I'm just curious if, oh, I lost the rest of the question, but what's being done from a affordable housing standpoint with funding for people on the short term right now?
Well, I'm happy to point it to Odessa and Tequila. I know that they have both been really valuable in helping connect people to a hotel stipend. So either of you want to speak more to that?
I mean, there's been money given to the Don't Sell Out North campaign to try to help with that, but I mean, that money is kind of fleeting. There's been a lot of money from the the community foundation that's went to other organizations. And I would be demanding that they use that money towards those funds. I don't have the actual list in front of me. I'm pretty sure someone on here has the list of the organizations who've actually gotten money from the community foundation. So I'm not sure of what it is that they're going to do with that money, if they've been mandated how they use it. But I think that is a valid request that they use those funds in that way, because I have no idea what those community organizations are going to do with that money.
Yeah, like Odessa said, we've gotten a very small grant, but that hasn't processed yet. As of now, the majority of our resources have come from single dollar donations from community members. And we've spent 100% of those dollars getting hotel accommodations for people, paying down payments on new apartments. And I know the same is for Gideon's Army. They've received a ton of single dollar donations, but again, that money is whittling away as people are being impacted by COVID and still being impacted by the tornado. And the thing about it is organizations like Gideon's Army are going to constantly be hit up for resources because they have the relationships. There's a huge need to make sure that the organizations on the ground are being fully funded or have the resources to be able to operate, because it puts us in a position where we're having to either refer out or, do an extra step of work just to make sure needs are met. So that is the challenging piece. I agree with Odessa. If there are resources from the city or from any community organizations that are wanting those resources to go directly to the people, that you consider a lot of the grassroots organizations that are on the ground and that have been on the ground for years, just doing a lot of that work. So.
And real quickly, we don't have to think about this in a streamlined way. With the COVID-19 out here, there are a lot of people at work who are not receiving a paycheck. And right now, as a state, I'm not sure where we are on evictions. If we put a moratorium on it, I don't think we can as a city, because we're a state interference. So with that happening, my landlord hit me up today and said he was collecting rent no matter what. Thank God I'm still getting a paycheck. Can you think about the individuals that are not? So when we start talking about how can we keep affordable housing, it's do we have a fund to make sure that landlords are receiving money for, because I'm sure they need that money to live, but there are individuals out here who are between a rock and a hard place, and they cannot afford to pay rent because they have less than $400 in savings. So us just thinking about what laws can we remove or put in place to give those type of protections too, that also in the long run add to more affordable and workforce housing in the city.
Yes, thankfully our sheriff's office is not processing any evictions. So I know Lee just mentioned that in the chat as well, which was really crucial for that. I think that went into place about 10 days ago and really crucial for people as we approach April 1st. I've been dealing with a number of those issues for people who contacted Hub Nashville wondering about that. And so we're trying to work that at the property manager level for the larger complexes to make sure that they're proactively communicating to people that, people are trying to, draw rent if your job hasn't been affected. But if you have documentation that you were affected, we need property managers to be able to work with people, which we've had good success with so far because they also understand the situation that people are in. We do still have people who are trying to process evictions, and those will not be processed. So thankfully, Legal Aid has been working on this as well to try to address any informal eviction measures that can be attempted, but lucky to have Legal Aid. And then in reference to the direct assistance, Community Foundation, when they announce the grants, shares, what's going to food, what's going to direct assistance, different categories. And so I know that Equity Alliance, that you both mentioned Gideon's Army, and that there's others that are T-wide, NeedLink, Rooftop Nashville, and Metro Action Commission is able to do some rent and mortgage and utility assistance. So that information is, again, cataloged at 211, but we're also trying to make sure that we update that as grants come through and people's capacity gets extended.
That just from a resources standpoint, one of the final questions was just how, we can't necessarily go out and volunteer right now in the conditions we're in. So it sounds like people wanting to get involved is donating their resources if they have money. Are there other ways beyond that people can, reaching out to legislatures? I think the point made, Odessa, about this COVID opportunity is impacting everybody across the whole state. It's not just a rural urban divide type of issue that we've seen happen. So how can we utilize this, and how can the silver lining of this tragedy and what we're going through with to change that and change the perspective of people?
Can y'all hear me? Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, thank you, Gary, for bringing that up. The plan isn't fully baked, but trust us that we're going to have a solid plan in place. We've been working on it for a while with other groups who are, thinking and working on these type of things for the past couple of years now. I will say a big help would be if people are able to reach out to family members or to other politicians in rural areas to ask to identify people who can speak on the state legislature about, how a lot of these rules that were specifically made to impact Nashville and Shelby, or Davidson and Shelby County, and how it's having unintended consequences in their hometowns as well. That's one of the things that would be really helpful. Send all the information to standupnashville@gmail.com, or you can send it to me at odessak@standupnashville.org. It's really going to take an effort of all of us demanding that our mayor and our elected officials stand up and make sure that they fight back against the state legislature to do what's best needed for our municipality. We're working on right now what's the best plan of action to do that. We all know me. There's no way that my Black dreadhead self can walk into Dixon County and get, a legislature to listen to me. So I need allies who can, and we need elected officials in those areas who can bend the ear of the governor and the state legislatures who make these aspersions on Nashville. And that just can't happen because everyone's health is at risk right now. So just sign up for our website at standupnashville.org, and we are literally going to try to put out a solid plan next week.
And I want to give an opportunity. Gideon's Army has been brought up a couple of times by Tequila and Odessa. Could you tell us that organization, because they're not on the panel? I just want to make sure that they get the recognition of the work they're doing.
Yeah, so Gideon's Army does work with youth in North Nashville, but not only youth. They do direct interruption with youth crime and anything else that is happening in North Nashville. They've been the first ones to do direct services, as Tequila talked about. They should be, because they've built relationships. The reason why they're not on this call is, they have a surrogate in me and Tequila here. Because one things that Tequila was talking about earlier in coalition building is that everyone has to stay in their lane and do the work that they do. There's no way that Stand Up Nashville is ever going to do direct services when we're in coalition with the Equity Alliance and Gideon Armies. That's what they do, right? At the same time, they're not going to do contract work because they know that's what we do. And that's what we specifically do. So with this being a call for civic design and architect and all the pathways that have a strong economic lens to it, the Gideon Armies has just trusted us to represent them well and what's needed in that lens.
Great, thank you. I should have mentioned that earlier. So thanks for clarifying that.
Shout out to Rashida and all of them, LT and Albito, and all the great work they do.
Yes. Yeah. I just wanted to highlight why I felt it was so necessary to continue to uplift Gideon's Army on the call was one, when the tornado happened, the first person that I got a call from at 4:00 in the morning was LT. Like, can you cash me money so I can go buy flashlights, because the residents are without flashlights. And so they went and bought over 100 flashlights. And from there, they were organizing and really mobilizing the community. So as a community leader, I felt though it's necessary to acknowledge them and the work that they're doing, but also to uplift the fact that they're doing that 100% based off of community support and not necessarily a lot of resources. So I just wanted to continue to uplift their work and their name as well, because again, like Odessa said, we are partners. There's the civic engagement piece that's a huge component of this, which is why, you know, you have the Equity Alliance present, you have Odessa present, you know, we're really about moving this ball forward as a community. That's what this is all about. So I like that. And plus, there are a million Zoom calls, and I'm not going to ask everybody to be on every Zoom.
Yeah.
Zooming out right now.
Yeah, divide and conquer is a good strategy, and sometimes, and appreciate the voices present and everybody that, I mean, I've just in the last 4 weeks, well, I was out a couple weeks just really focused on my own personal home, but our team here went out into the community and wanted to get engaged and be involved. And through that process over the last month, we've just met so many more organizations and are working, I think, in a much more collaborative process. And that's something that you have to realize that that you do. And sometimes you may get in the silos, and this can bring groups together in ways that maybe we haven't worked together before. So I think we're nearing the end of the program time. There's time for a few more questions and comments. I just wanted to say, I think it's important that we, in the last month that we've been through, we always need to hear a little bit of positivity and joy in life. And so I was curious, I know that with everybody being out and engaged so much over the last month, I'd love to hear any stories of inspiration that you've experienced over the past few weeks that you might want to share with our attendees.
I can kick it off if no one else has anything.
Please.
So before I became executive director for Stand Up Nashville, I worked for Metro Parks and Recreation for 14 years. Worked at Napier Community Center. So I've been worried, as I think someone mentioned, mental health, you know, and so I've been checking in with a lot of the kids in that area. I was talking to 2 or 3 of the kids on the phone who are highly intelligent, but hate going to school every day. They can't stand it. And it's something to be said about this slowdown in pace, to where people can really just take a breath and breathe. Of course, like, it's not to, we all know that this pandemic is horrible, but with that said, all of these kids were struggling with getting up every morning and going to school and having to be on someone else's clock. So just having the change in pace to where they can really catch their breath, breathe, and not be on such a rigid schedule has been great. When they called me, they told me they weren't playing Fortnite every day, that they were actually reading books and on podcasts. Mm-hmm. So yeah, to me, I think that's really good to hear, because whenever we do get back to our schedule, hopefully we'll take in place some of the lessons that we're learning here of how stress-induced our pace was before.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else from the group?
Well, I guess I'll share positive.
Okay.
My birthday was March 26th. And I had like this big elaborate vacation to Jamaica planned. I mean, it was gonna be awesome. So I thought I would be on the beach even right now. I was supposed to come back tomorrow. But I spent the day, I spent the day riding around with my daughter, just really appreciating just the scenery, the mountains in Tennessee, the water. And I can honestly say it was the most at peace I've felt in a very long time. Mm-hmm. So if anything positive I feel like I can take from this whole situation that's going on is I've connected with so many people during this time. I've been able to have conversations with people that I have not been able to get in contact with. And I've spent time just really reflecting and just really living in the moment and enjoying what's happening around. So even though I miss Jamaica.
We're gonna have a huge party for you when you can all get us together. Okay.
Make sure you get Caitlin. Caitlin's had her hand up for a while.
Oh yeah, Caitlin, come on.
Let me unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's getting dark over here. Our kind of story, of a community partner that has been really a hero to Rebuilding Together is Melvin, who runs the 50 Forward Bordeaux Center. And they are an area, so they have members that come and spend their days. So it's a big piece of a lot of our older adult neighbors. It's a big piece of their socialization in their day. And it was heartbreaking when they had to temporarily close their centers. And watching Melvin and his team kind of turn on a dime and turn his activity center, community center, into just an amazing food delivery organization. They're setting up food kits, they're making hot meal deliveries, making sure seniors are having all their needs met. They are, making prescription pickups. It really has been amazing watching the dexterity and the compassion of all the nonprofit partners who really have shifted in all this going on. So I want to give out a shout out, especially to our nonprofit partners who are serving seniors, and Melvin at 50 Forward Bordeaux.
Today, we've got 22 knowledge communities in the American Institute of Architects. So if it's an architect that's focused on healthcare, which we happen to have a lot of those in Nashville, I got a message from the technology and the architectural practice today that they are 3D printing personal protective devices. So that's an exciting feel-good story. The small practice, also out of TAP, they have been meeting and talking and helping one another on how to set up an architectural firm virtually. We've got some firms that are 1- and 2-man firms, which, believe it or not, it's just as hard for them to get into a remote format as it is for a 200, 300-man firm. So sharing of the resources, I think, is what's heartwarming to me, just like the call that we have here today. And just learning to respect a disaster and the city leaders that lead us through these things, and seeing the sacrifices that are being made by everybody, because everybody's on the front line right now. So amen. It's all good. We're going to get through it.
Man, I am so impressed by, I have been since March 3rd, by the organizations, like you said, Tequila, like 1 a.m., March 3rd, let's go, what are we doing to take care of our neighbors? And obviously the volunteers, 26,000 volunteers in total had signed up, which was more than the first 8 months after the flood. Sort of seeing the benefits of social media, seeing people be able to stay connected and reach out to, like Melvin, and seeing seniors get connected on social media to try to stay connected to community and make sure that they are receiving the social emotional supports they need. Probably my biggest daily dose of inspiration is a text thread that we have at the mayor's office with, I'm sure a lot of Kathy Bucks and Eric Brown and Mary Beth Eichert, and people who are constantly receiving requests from the community, and then working with different council members as well, saying, I have a family of 4 that has this ability need and for housing, what can we do? Okay, you can get transit, you'll get furniture, you'll get adequate shelter, and seeing how dedicated these my colleagues are, but then the trust and community that we've built up, that we can get the chance to work with these organizations who, even in the midst of their own organizational challenges, shifting to a virtual model, are so dedicated to our neighbors. It's really incredible. It's people, will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that our neighbors have what they need. So it's, of course, really challenging, and I appreciated what Carol said about making space for the emotional pain that people are going through during this time of grief and loss for so many of us. But then meeting that grief with grace and dedication to say, I'm here with you and for you, and getting to work with those people is really an honor.
Well, thank you all for sharing that. And I'll say from my perspective as homeowner going through this personally, it's when I found out that, so few people were hurt, but, and coming back to that and seeing your house gone, the overwhelming feeling for me was not for the loss of anything that I had, but it was seeing my friends, but also perfect strangers just show up and asking if they could help. And I could not have gotten anything done if that support system had not been there. And I know people across that, we talked about Tennessee is a volunteer state, and Nashville being known for how it comes together and helps support community members here. But I would have to say that when I got upset and I started breaking down and crying, it was because I was overwhelmed by the love that I felt from both friends, coworkers, people that I didn't even know across the city. So I get chills just thinking about that, and I'm so grateful for not only what I experienced myself, but I know what other people are in some ways going through. And we have to continue to be supportive of our community here. It's only been 4 weeks. We know it's a long road ahead, but I think with all the voices present and making sure that we learn from past things that we've gone through in the city, ways and unintended consequences of redevelopment, and how we make sure that we always incorporate communities and reflecting that and being proactive to making sure that we're building a city of Nashville that's better for everyone and not just a few. So thank you all for joining us tonight for our very first ever virtual urban design forum. And I know we'll be having another one next month, so you can stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll not have to have this in May. I know we're all hoping and praying for that. But I want to thank our nonprofit partners, Stand Up Nashville, Equity Alliance, Rebuilding Together, American Institute of Architects, and the Mayor's Office and the City of Nashville for joining us for this event. I think we've gotten great comments back, and appreciate all of your voices in the conversation. We did want to let you know that the proceeds of the ticket sales for this event, there was a donation, a suggested donation, go out to the Don't Sell Out North Fund, and you can find more information about that. I know as of when we started, we'd raised $600. So, and we, the Civic Design Center, have created our own, it's a digitally engaging communities fund. There's certain costs that go into obviously these transitions, and so there's a way to assist with that if you're interested for our membership base as well. And I think the links to that are being posted in the chat box. This is an unprecedented time for all organizations in the city in ways that we can be more innovative in our community engagement efforts. So we'll want to continue the dialogue with organizations across the city and with different departments to ensure, and nonprofits and foundations, that we're doing the best job we can do in engagement in the coming months. Addition to our urban design forums, we have quarterly pachachas, and we're even testing out a digital design charrette process where we can engage community members beyond just maybe this type of meeting, but how do we actually do that as well from a digital engagement. So I thank you so much for joining us. I do want to say after this portion of the panel ends, we do have about a 5-minute video which is a footage that was taken the days following the tornado. And I know that this can be sensitive footage for many of you on at the meeting. And so I just want to let you know that if you but there's people who are not affected or outside the city that may want to see more of exactly what we're talking about with the damage that happened, and see how what we've gone through in the city. So if you don't feel like watching that, I would recommend that you end the call now. That will be it over the next 5 minutes. So Caitlin, Carol, Hannah, Odessa, Tequila, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to continuing conversation in the coming days and weeks. And thank everybody else for being here with us tonight. Good night.